Vladimir Putin thumbs his nose at the U.S. again. And Michael Bloomberg tells gun owners to be afraid. I'll tell you all that and more on our Grassroots Citizen panel. It's next. Don't go anywhere. All right, welcome back, everybody. And now it's time for our Grassroots Citizen panel. And joining me in the studio is Melory Tsipouria, president of the U.S. Georgia Friendship Association. Good to see you again, Melory.
Good to see you, Rick.
Tell us what that is, U.S. Georgia Friendship.
Well, it's a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and as kind of name speaks for itself, we work in on issues that mutual interest and try to deepen friendship between two countries, two allies, I might add, because Georgia has been #1 non-NATO contributor of troops to Afghanistan and Iraq previous to.
Is that right?
Yes.
Wow. And in studio, as he often is Stephen Kavanaugh, Democratic political strategist. Good to see you, Stephen.
Thanks for having me back, Rick.
And from Washington, D.C., from the Washington Times studios, is the man on the street videographer for the Media Research Center, Dan Joseph. Dan, I heard you made a radio appearance earlier today or sometime very recently.
I did. You know, one of my comedy and entertainment heroes, Dennis Miller, was kind enough to have me on the show, and it was just a dream come true. It's just great to. I mean, I remember when he was on Saturday Night Live. I wanted to be Dennis Miller. He's a political guy, so it's nice to have on talk radio.
It is. All right. Well, congratulations. I've been on Miller's show myself, and it is a lot of fun.
Thank you.
All right. So, of course, it's this first topic I think is right in Melory's wheelhouse of expertise, if you will. At least I'm sure you have an opinion or two to say about this. Vladimir Putin says that escalating conflict puts Ukraine on the brink of civil war. I think we all knew that already without Vladdy weighing in on it. Let's start with Melory. What should President Obama do in the case of Ukraine? Should we get involved?
Of course. And first of all, Vladimir Putin made that announcement, but he's the reason that situation is on a brink of war, and he's the aggressor in that war. On your last show, or my appearance last time on your show, I said Putin's not going to stop unless somebody stops them. And Putin's not going to stop with Crimea. They're going to take eastern Ukraine. They're going to swallow the rest of Ukraine. And they're not going to stop there. They're going to proceed with Moldova, with my native Georgia, and so on and so forth. As far as United States and President's response, it has been very disappointed. And I do talk to friends in Georgia, in Ukraine, in Baltic states, and just kind of many with all over from that region. And they are disappointed. For example, Secretary Kerry announces sanctions. In the very same sentence, he apologizes to Mr. Putin and saying that it's nothing personal. This shows timidness. This shows indecision, and no wonder that things have gotten worse. He should have said it's not personal against Russian people.
That's right.
But it is very personal against Putin, against his government, and their criminal behavior.
I agree. He should have made a distinction between Russian people and Russian government. Before we get Stephen involved, Melory, another question related. There are those who make an interesting point. They say, wait a minute now. Vladimir Putin for years said, don't put NATO on our doorstep. Don't put NATO in Ukraine in NATO. Leave us, leave our neighbors, our borders alone, and you won't have to worry about us. But for some reason, the West didn't do that. And now we're seeing perhaps the ramifications of that. What do you say to those who make that argument?
Vladimir Putin is not president of Ukraine. He cannot make a decision for Ukrainian people which alliances they're going to join. Just the premise of that and allowing that to take place and Vladimir Putin to get away with it, it's wrong and it's dangerous.
That's a good point, but what if Putin or China did the same thing in Tijuana, Mexico, or Mexico itself? What would you expect the U.S. response to be?
Doing like station Russian troops in Mexico? Well, it's kind of sovereign matter between Mexico and Russia, frankly.
Okay. All right. I was just curious, given your background as president of U.S. Georgia Friendship and your history. Stephen Kavanaugh, same question. Putin, those who say, wait a minute, he told us not to go there. What if Russia, China put troops in Mexico?
You know, I do think that we would have a rather aggressive response. That being said, I don't think that we would go annex more of Mexico or Canada for that matter. And this is a point where Vladimir Putin has really overstepped his boundaries. I think that the United States was right to at least make an attempt at the reset, which now clearly has failed, because we wanted to try to show good faith. We wanted to try to see if there was a play to get them to work with us on Iran and Syria. That is obviously not panning out.
Before we go to Dan, what should our response be now?
Our response now should be to lift the ban on crude oil, to give some relief, the ban on exporting crude oil, to give some relief to the Europeans and some leeway so they can ratchet up pressure on them, and we ought to arm the Ukrainians.
Arm the Ukrainians. Dan Joseph, you care to weigh in on this?
Well, sure. I mean, one thing I was thinking is if Russia or China took over Mexico, they would sure stop the illegal immigration problem coming into the United States. I mean, they're famous for not letting anybody out of their countries. So that might actually be a helpful thing. No, I think Vladimir Putin holds all the cards here. I think President Obama had a chance to do something earlier, and now he hasn't. So I think he's lost his opportunity. But Putin's in a very, very good position, because what he can say is he can allow these pro-Russian protesters to do all the work for him by fighting against the Ukrainian government. He can just sit there and say, oh, I have nothing to do with it. It's nothing to do with me. And then see how powerful they are, and then step in and once again say, oh, I'm just protecting the protesters, the Russian protesters, like I was last time. I sense that that's going to be sort of his modus operandi all over the region.
Can I disagree with that?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. I could not disagree more about Putin holding the good cards or all the cards.
A lot of Americans believe that. Tell us why
that is totally wrong. We are holding the cards. With harsh sanctions, we could achieve resolving this crisis probably within a month. 2, 3, 4.
Give us an idea how.
Instead of this comical 11, 21 people sanctions, we should hit what it hurts, which is the oil companies, because Russia is heavily depending on an energy dollar. Soon as that dollar dries up, and actually about the effectiveness of the sanctions, they are depending on an international banking and financing system. So we could hurt them severely, and therefore we could actually stop them. And another thing I would say, besides, and I agree about arming Ukraine, we should have a heavy military presence in the Black Sea. Before I came on this segment, I saw the news segment on
One American News.
Yes, that Rasmussen, which is a NATO chief, announced some flights over the Baltic states, which is a good idea, and beefing up presence in the Eastern Mediterranean. But what about actual Black Sea, where actual conflict is going on? Beefing up military presence in the Black Sea, or in my native Georgia, which is also on the Black Sea. There are very good reasons, and if I have time, I could describe them, what that would do. First of all, it would show...
All right, we want to switch gears, right? You make your point. We can be tougher than we're being. Let's switch gears for a moment here. Let's go to... Now, New York, the NYPD, the New York Police Department, ironically, I suppose, on the anniversary of the Boston Marathon bombing tragedy, they announced the end of their Muslim surveillance program. It appears to me, Stephen Kavanaugh, to be politics over what's best for the people of New York, because Mayor de Blasio was a big critic of that program during the campaign. What's your take on this?
Well, I think the matter of efficacy is in question. When you have an entire Muslim community, the vast majority of which are law-abiding, love America, and you make them feel like they are all being watched, you might turn some folks off who would otherwise be more cooperative with us and turning in their own, who become radicalized. That would be my concern on the merits of doing away with it.
You fear it radicalizes?
I wouldn't say that. I would say that it could miss an opportunity, squander an opportunity to have the moderates in that community single out and point out those who are becoming radicalized.
You know, I say that on 9/11 there were not any Norwegians, Mexicans, or Irish on that plane.
True.
I have no problem with Muslim surveillance program. We'll get your response and Dan Joseph's response on the other side of this break. I'm Rick Amato. You're watching the Rick Amato Show on One American News. We're back with more right after this. Welcome back, everybody. And like I said earlier, if you've just discovered us and are new to watching the Rick Amato Show here on the One American News Network, I want to welcome you. And thank you for taking the time to check us out. But I also want to hear from you. Let me know what's on your mind, good, bad, or indifferent. Email me directly. You can reach me at rickamato@oann.com. And as I say every night, I answer all email personally. And follow me on Twitter at Amato Talk. All right, just before the break, gentlemen, we're talking about the fact that the NYPD, ironically, coincidentally, whatever you want to say, on the anniversary of the Boston Marathon bombings, has announced that they're putting an end to their Muslim surveillance program. Let's go to Dan Joseph in Washington, D.C. from the Media Research Center. Dan, good idea, bad idea?
Well, you know, Rick, we tend to get so wrapped up in this country these days about the political correct aspects of it, about the ethnic and racial complications of all this, and we forget to ask very important questions. First of all, who was the NYPD watching? I mean, they're not just going to bug every single Muslim home in the New York area. They can't do that. They had to get leads. They had to choose a few people that they thought might take them somewhere. Second of all, the more important question is, what did they learn? Now, those on the left are very quick to say, oh, well, no, nothing happened. It's just like with waterboarding. You know, they're even writing up phony Senate reports to claim that we learned absolutely nothing, but the NYPD claims they actually did. We need to learn whether it was effective or not before we start making judgments just based on the politically correct views of a very, very few people. I think the people of New York City want to be protected first and foremost.
Good point. You know, the irony is that the NSA will spy on all Americans, but let's not let the NYPD target those that they have leads on from the Muslim community. You wanted to say something about Ukraine before you switch gears.
Yes, I just wanted to point out that military presence, U.S. military presence in the Black Sea will deliver the unequivocal message to Putin that we have no intention of abandoning that region and our allies in it.
I think that's a great point. Symbolism matters.
Yes.
I agree.
Okay, moving on. Go ahead.
About that issue about Muslim surveillance, if that program prevented even one terrorist act,
it worked.
I think it should continue.
It worked if it prevented one. That's an excellent point. This guy's making points here, Steve. All right, now, moving on. As I referenced earlier in the show, as part of our Jag Off of the Day segment, the president of Western Washington University in the state of Washington put out a school-wide memo saying that we need less white people here, and we are a failure if our future includes more white people. I don't know how you define white people. I mean, if you go to a tanning bed, are you no longer part of the white people? I don't get it. But let's take a look at this video of the president of Western Washington University on that subject.
If we 10 years from now are as white as we are today, we will have failed as a university in our commitment to meet the critical needs of our state. If in the decades ahead we are as white as we are today, we will have failed as a university.
You know, Dan Joseph, let me mention, first of all, this is a publicly funded university, not a private university. Dan, I mentioned in the Jag Off of the Day segment, he gives whole new meaning of judging a school's success based upon one's skin color and not the content of the curriculum.
You know, look, Rick, you know as well as anyone that nobody hates white people as much as I do. But I think in this situation, we really have to question this guy. I want to go up there and ask him, as I often go to college campuses and ask people the tough questions, like, can you name a senator? I'd like to ask this guy, okay, give me a reason why fewer white students would benefit the education at your campus, would help students of other ethnicities and other color matriculate better. What is the benefit of fewer white students? It's like saying, what's the benefit of having more black students or more Muslim students? What does diversity for the sake of diversity bring with it? What benefits does it have? And I don't think he'd be able to answer that question.
I don't think he would either. The irony, Stephen Kavanaugh, is he's making the point of let's be a more tolerant society and not judge others based upon skin color.
A little
ironic.
ironic.
Out of here.
Yeah, it's a little ironic. Here's an example where words really matter, and his blockheaded choice of words really undermines the cause and value, the valid cause and value of diversity. And I would definitely disagree with you that there aren't any values to diversity. But when you put it in language like that, it really undermines the fact that we really need to do more to balance out the social distortions that are the legacy of decades ago. And going forward, if we're more objective about this, I think that we'll do a better job of tweaking stuff like affirmative action to stop being race-based as it starts to equal out and start looking at it economically. And when you use language like that, it undermines all of it.
Here's where I disagree. We ought to make it not race-based now and make it economic need now. Dan Joseph, I hear you want to weigh in.
Well, let me just say, I mean, I agree. I think diversity has its benefits if it's not done just for the sake of having diversity. If it can be about people learning about other people's cultures and sharing knowledge and sharing things that other people from other cultures don't know, it's a very positive thing.
Agree.
But if right off the bat you vilify an entire race
in
order to have diversity, that's just doing it backwards, and it serves no purpose whatsoever.
No, you're absolutely right.
Melory, go ahead.
I'm immigrant from country of Georgia. My wife is immigrant from Mexico. But we teach our children to work hard and not to expect any help, whether it's quota or otherwise, and not to rely on anybody but themselves. So I think that's
we could use more people from Georgia actually in our colleges. That would actually teach our students a lot. They could know about the ravages of communism and how it affected them. I think that would be far more important than just getting rid of white people.
Go ahead, Steve.
I'm all for that, but we do need to realize that there has been a legacy of an imbalance that still does exist.
And I don't think anyone is... That's why I don't get on the left, Stephen. When we talk about capitalism, we don't say, let's have zero regulation. But Barack Obama and those on the left will say, you know, those on the right want zero regulation. When we talk about unfairness in society, we don't say that it never existed and that an unfair society is unfair. And that's kind of the argument you're making.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. And I think people who object to this, should be everyone. But when you use language like that, it really undermines...
He gave a lot of thought to this. He gave a speech and he sent out a memo. It wasn't like...
This wasn't off the cuff either.
This was not Joe Biden.
Yeah, and especially
he's
from
the president of a university?
Yeah, public university, that I would say that's especially intolerable.
It's intolerant. Yeah. Should he be reprimanded by the state?
At least.
Let me ask you one other on that, Stephen, since you're kind enough to weigh in so much. Let's be honest here. Those who... I'm going to make a general statement.
Okay.
Those who, in general, disagree will be on the right. But it's a general statement. Well-minded people will disagree with him, as you have. As a general statement, those on the left are going to support him. Probably the far left. What would you say to your brother on the left who are supporting this president?
The university?
Yeah.
I would say we can support the ideas behind it, but realize that that sort of language cannot be tolerated, and he should at least be reprimanded for that, at least.
Yeah. Final comment on that, Melory?
I pretty much agree. That's not the way to go. We are not against diversity, obviously, but those comments are just out of order. You
know, and again, I twisted the words, play on words of Martin Luther King. What I'm after, Stephen, is what you're after. I want to see people judged on the content of their character, on the achievement of their merit, which is what you're talking about, and Dan Joseph is talking about. And this undermines that in the name of political correctness, right? So let's judge the school on the content of his curriculum.
Again, just going back to affirmative action, because I think that's what he's alluding to. I think it's a valid and necessary thing that's done good, and that in the future will need to be tweaked. But when you're not objective about it, and you use charged, blockheaded language like that, it undermines all of it. Yeah,
we're out of time. Dan Joseph, I just want to say, I hope that you at the Media Research Center have a chance to show up with some suntan at a local tanning salon and show up at that university's doorstep and ask them, where do you fit? All right. I want to thank you.
Oh, man, that would be funny.
It will be. It would be. Or it will be. We'll see. Hint, hint, hint. I want to thank Melory Tsipouria, president of the U.S. Georgia Friendship Association. That's not Atlanta, Georgia, folks. I want to thank Stephen Kavanaugh, Democratic political strategist.
Thanks for having me.
And Dan Joseph, the man on the street videographer with the Media Research Center. Thanks for being part of our Grassroots System panel.
Thank you, Rick.
And I want to thank you. I want to thank you, our viewers, for watching. We're right back at you again tomorrow, 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 o'clock Pacific.